I want to do a deep dive into The Reckoning, Mary Trump's new book, Our Nation's Trauma and Finding a Way to Heal. Mary, of course, has a Ph.D. from the Derner Institute of Advanced Psychological Studies at Adelphi University, has taught graduate courses in trauma, psychotherapy, developmental psychology. Recently launched a Substack newsletter, The Good in Us, to which I subscribe. So I know that she just came back from Amsterdam and had some great pizza there. And I don't know, hopefully it's not all that jet lagged. And of course, the author of her previous book, Too Much and Never Enough, How My Family Created the World's Most Dangerous Man, and her current book, The Reckoning, Our Nation's Trauma and Finding a Way to Heal. Her website, marytrump.substack.com, and her Twitter handle, Mary L. Trump, at Mary L. Trump. Mary, welcome to the program, or welcome back to the program. It's nice to have you back with us.
Tom, it's great to be here. And I actually do have jet lag, but I'm so excited to be on with you that I feel great.
Oh, bless you.
Good.
Thank you. Your book provokes so many questions. and there's so many things I wanted to talk to you about. I'm really glad that you're able to make the hour with us, and we can do this Conversations with Great Minds deep dive here that we rarely do with people and authors, but certainly you're one of the people that I really wanted to do this with. Let me just start with the question, your thoughts on the possibility that your Uncle Donald will run for president in 2024. It looks to me, we know in the first 3 months of this year, I guess it was, that he raised $100 million. I'm on his list. I sent $15 to him, along with about a dozen other candidates back in 2015 during the Republican primary. And so I'm getting 7 or 8 emails a day from him, from his sons, from his friends, from Rudy, begging for money. And I'm guessing that they are dinging the accounts, particularly of elderly people on the edge of dementia who don't remember that yesterday they also gave to Trump. I think, it looks to me like he's just wiping out old people across the country, but maybe I'm completely wrong. But, it seems to me like this is just another big scam to raise money. He's probably raised $200-300 million so far, rather than an actual attempt to run for president. What say you?
Well, first of all, I think you're very brave to be on those lists. I couldn't get all those emails. It would make me insane.
Well, this is what I do for a living.
I know. And that's why I'm glad we have you.
Thank you.
So I don't have to. But, I think part of it is the fact that anybody's allowed to do this without having it be regulated or without having to make an account is a huge problem with our system. But getting back to the broader question, is he going to run? First of all, I kind of resent that people like you and I have to take that question seriously, because I believe we do. I just wish that, the mainstream media would ask a more important question is why would he be allowed to run? But here we are. I have to say that my thinking on this issue has evolved since the 2020 election. Immediately after that, when he lost so badly to Joe Biden, and was completely humiliated, because in my family, losing is pretty much the worst thing you can do, and being a loser is the worst thing you can be. I said he would never put himself in that position again to suffer such an egregious narcissistic injury. However, what we saw over time was the Republican Party starting to either to back his big lie or remain silent in the face of it and allow him to perpetuate it. That, of course, being that the 2020 election was illegitimate and it was stolen from him because he, of course, won. None of that is true. And then January 6th happened, and as we've seen over time, the Republican Party has also backed him and not put up a fight, and not, they're not supporting the January 6th committee, et cetera. So I think that eliminates one obstacle to his running. The other issue is that the Republican Party is also making it easier for him to run and not lose. In other words, as you know, in every single state, Republican legislatures are trying to push through voter suppression bills. Mm-hmm. So if they can manage to rig the system even more in their favor, and obviously the system is very rigged towards Republicans, and Donald gets that message that if he runs, he can't lose, he might, simply because, although, yes, scamming money off of old people is something that he really likes to do, he also probably wants to avoid a lot of the legal jeopardy he's currently facing, both criminally and civilly. So he may come to the conclusion that the best place for him to be is the Oval Office, which would afford him the powers and protections that he probably is really missing right about now. I hope that doesn't happen. His health is also a big concern. And if the wheels of justice could start revolving a little faster, that would be very helpful. But I don't think it's a settled issue one way or the other at the moment.
Yeah, I understand and agree. How, the Republican Party has changed so consequentially in the last 6 months, or last 6 years, excuse me. Just remember the people that Trump was running against in the primary, who there were a few crackpots, but the people like Jeb Bush were just old line mainstream Republicans who just basically wanted to help out rich people with tax cuts and have a decent life. And now you've got a Republican Party whose heroes are people like Madison Cawthorn and Marjorie Taylor Greene, who respectively said, Cawthorn, after the Rittenhouse verdict, said, Republicans need to be armed and dangerous. And Marjorie Taylor Greene was talking about, blood is the way that you overcome tyranny, and this kind of Civil War rhetoric. And it almost always in the context of race. I mean, it has gone from being the party that dog whistles about race, from Nixon's Southern strategy to Reagan's first public speech as a candidate for president, and down in Mississippi, in Philadelphia, Mississippi, where Schwimmer, Goodman, and Cheney were murdered, and the Willie Horton ads of George W. Bush. I mean, we know that there's been this racial component, but your uncle just turned it into a front and center thing that people are just essentially proud of. They're no longer even embarrassed by. How deep do you think that goes in the GOP? I mean, are most of these people just opportunists who are saying, okay, this is a white supremacist, white nationhood moment in America, so I'm going to ride that wave? Or are these people who have always really believed that white people are the pinnacle of evolution, are destined to rule, that people of color should be in an inferior status, and women, by the way, as well, although we hear less about that, but that seems to be a subset of their agenda? What's going on in the Republican Party here?
I think it's a combination of both, plus the fact that they see an opportunity that I don't believe would have necessarily presented itself before Donald. Although, let's be clear, I think Mitch McConnell has been doing his part to make sure that the Republican Party maintains power at no matter what cost, even before Donald came on the scene. But what he did do was show them that you can basically get away with anything as long as you keep pushing the envelope and refuse to take responsibility. So the demographic changes in this country have kind of created a sense of urgency that, combined with the fact that they are opportunists who are either comfortable making use of racist tropes, or who are themselves white supremacists. And I guess if you're comfortable being with racism, then you probably are a white supremacist. Has pushed them to this point where they are absolutely willing to do anything to hold on to power, no matter how illegitimately they acquire it. And that's why this moment we face is so dangerous, because they are running out of time. They know that if there were a level playing field, if everybody who is entitled to vote in this country was allowed to vote in this country, Republicans, I don't believe, could ever win a national election again. They're trying to fix it so that Democrats can never win an election again, national election again, through this insane gerrymandering they're doing and the voter suppression bills that they're ramming through, because they only need 3 states.
So Mary, the first part of that question was how has your uncle changed the Republican Party, and my understanding of your answer was basically he showed them how far you can push the envelope, and now they're jumping into that. So the second part of the question is, how long will that last? I mean, what's it going to take for the Republican Party to pull back from that, or to I mean, is it going to take a moral moment, or is it going to take electoral defeat, or are we destined to see a political party that, sort of like the National Socialists did in 1933 or in 1924 in Italy, the Mussolini's party, they're now on a path that they can't turn away from until they flip the country essentially fascist?
Yeah, I don't think that they have any incentive to either abandon Donald or to abandon the path they're currently on. I think we saw in the gubernatorial election in Virginia that Youngkin was trying to find a way to thread the needle of maintaining Donald's support without embracing it necessarily. So I think the Republicans are discovering that they can continue to embrace Trumpism, so-called, without Donald.
But there appears to be quite a backlash in Virginia right now, where Youngkin is being trashed on right-wing message boards left and right. He hired a guy who is gay on his staff, and that's just like produced this total freakout among the Trump folks.
Yeah, and that's definitely a lesson, sure. But he did win with with this strategy of kind of keeping Donald at arm's length, and it obviously doing something as egregious as hiring a gay person in today's Republican Party will get you backlash. But I think they're all going to learn what line they have to toe, and if you see the cravenness of people like Ted Cruz, who, by the way, if we had been unfortunate enough to have Ted Cruz as president in 2016, would have dealt with COVID like a sane person. They are all willing to go down this very dark road. So I think they will come to the point where they realize they don't need him anymore, and that it's just going to take off without him. Because, I mean, unless I'm wrong, he's not immortal. He won't be around forever. And at that point, all of the things that they helped him, that he helped them reveal about who they are, will have taken even stronger root. And let's be clear, Donald hasn't done anything new. He hasn't changed the Republican Party. He's just revealed who they've always been, I think, at least in my lifetime.
Yeah, and much like the Republicans bound themselves to St. Ronnie after he vanished from the public scene, when he was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, he had shown them that you can destroy the unions. Mary, we've been talking about the Republican Party and how it is changing, and I want to, in a small way, come back to that in a little bit. But I'm wondering what, as a psychologist and a keen political observer, and that's one of the things that has always most impressed me about you, is your ability to understand the psychological impact of politics and the political impact of changes, psychological changes in our society, and the psychology of the individual politicians, in part from your own experience, and in part, I'm guessing, from watching your uncle go through this stuff. But the question is, what does your uncle Donald Trump have in common psychologically with autocrats that we've seen in the past? I know Hitler comparisons are considered kind of over the top, but there's Mussolini, there's Franco, there's Pinochet, or in the modern era, I mean, people like Modi in India, or Duterte in the Philippines, or Jair Bolsonaro in Brazil, all people who aspire to be, Mussolini-level autocrats. What do they have in common psychologically?
Well, I mean, a very deep narcissism, which covers over an even deeper insecurity. These are men who refer to strong men, but the fact that they need the attention, that they crave that level of power, to me suggests that they're incredibly weak. However, they're incredibly good. And I think Donald might be better at this than certainly better at this than anybody I've ever met. They're incredibly good at finding people who are weaker than they are, which is a trick and a half, because Donald's the weakest person I've ever met in my life. And they're very, very good at instilling fear in people and transforming that fear into anger, because fear is a terribly uncomfortable emotion. It doesn't feel good, but you need it in order to turn it into an anger and sometimes even a rage that can be used for your own purposes if you aspire to be an autocrat. So I think Donald definitely shares all of those traits with the men you mentioned. With this difference, I have never seen anybody who aspires to be an autocrat and be a peer with other autocrats who acts so insecure and inferior around other strongmen. The way he is around Putin is almost inexplicable to me.
Oh, he's like lapdog 101.
Oh, yeah, exactly. And you don't see Putin, Bolsonaro, Duterte, etc., acting like that around anybody. So that part is kind of stunning. But unfortunately, he has a lot more in common with them than not.
Why don't Republicans recognize that Trump is behaving like a sniveling underling to people like Putin?
It's very interesting to think about that. And I tried, especially when I was writing my first book, I tried very, very hard to be objective. I took a step back. I tried to figure out what I was missing. There are tens of millions of people who support Donald. There are tens of millions of people who admire him. What are they admiring that I am not seeing? And then I realized something crucially important. The things they admire, it's not that they found something that I missed. The things they admire in him are the things I revile. And that's the trick.
Yeah, amazing. I want to get into authoritarianism and the slide toward fascism and what do we do about racism in this country with Mary Trump. Her new book, The Reckoning, Our Nation's Trauma and Finding a Way to Heal. Absolute brilliant book, by the way. And check out her newsletter at marytrump.substack.com.